Hello and welcome to a very special episode number 300 of The Clean Energy Show.
Who are you?
I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham.
This week, Chinese EV car brand NIO is the king of electric cars that can swap out their batteries in a matter of minutes. They recently completed a record 175,000 battery swaps in a single day. As a result, I will no longer complain about having to swap out the batteries in the TV remote once a year.
Everyone's talking about Mexican drug cartels this week, but did you know they also make almost as much money stealing oil and gas from pipelines in Mexico as they do in the drug trade? This has been going on since the 80s, when they used it to replace their lucrative Cabbage Patch Kid trade.
We have a dramatic update on Ethiopia, which banned the sale of new combustion cars back in 2024. And the dramatic update is, actually, there's no drama at all. It's working well, and it's really boring.
Well, let's update it then. All that and more in this edition of The Clean Energy Show. Brian, happy 300th episode.
Amazing. 300 and almost 6 years, almost exactly 6 years. That was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So that's just stupid. It's just hard to believe that we have 300 hours of content and we are a well-oiled machine producing content every week for the most part. I look back at our episode 100 and 200 episode shows.
Yeah.
And episode 100 was the UK is already seeing less emissions because of EVs. It is so significant you can now smell a gin-soaked party at 10 Downing Street from anywhere in London. So that would be Boris Yeltsin era. Not Boris Yeltsin.
Boris Johnson?
Boris Johnson era stuff. And it seems like yesterday. Like that doesn't seem like 200 episodes ago, does it?
Yeah, that's crazy.
And in 200, an angry mob in San Francisco set a Waymo self-driving car on fire. That seems like yesterday. What's going on?
Yeah.
Time. I have a terrible relationship with time. Like, it's just stupid.
It really passes differently the older you get. I think
secret?
it's partly your brain chemicals, and maybe there's a pill. Maybe there's a pill you can take.
Well, there's nothing new under the sun. Maybe I should podcast from a different location every week and maybe slow down time.
Well, this is the thing. Yeah, they say that your brain, like you may drive to work 1,000 times, but your brain isn't going to remember all 1,000 of it sort of remembers one time and then your brain multiplies it by 1,000. So it's like we've podcasted one time and your brain multiplies it by 300, something like that.
Well, we encourage you to check out our back catalog of shows. They're all free for everyone to get. They go way back in time. Don't go too far, though, because, we had to get practiced to get good at this. We were a little rusty in the beginning, perhaps, and, there's a few shows missing from the catalog early on. But check out another show if you like, and sometimes we'll repeat those as I have to take a little hiatus this summer, probably. We'll probably have a couple of repeats on the feed and maybe some interviews or something to fill it in while I'm gone for a little while.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to see how far we've come in clean energy. We talk about that all the time, but, in only 6 years, many, many things have changed and advanced and gotten better and can always go faster. Yeah. This transition to clean energy is never fast enough, but it's happening, and that's what we have stories about this week.
All right.
But before we get to that, I want to start with a new segment on the show called Travel Tips with Brian. Roll the theme song, James. All right.
I got a harp. Do you want a harp?
Yeah.
Got a
we didn't
ding.
make one.
Got a nuclear thing. Is it nuclear related? Got a law thing.
The Geiger counter.
Got different things. Got the tweet of the week. I don't have a theme song for Brian's travel tips. So what travel tips do you have, Mr. Stockton?
Long time ago on the podcast, I complained about TVs in hotel rooms, and this has come up a few times. I've been traveling a bit lately, and you get to a hotel room and you can never adequately control the TV because they come with these hotel-specific remotes that don't give you access to all the settings on the TV. And as a film and television professional, this drives me crazy because I can't set up the TV the way I want. The biggest problem is the so-called soap opera effect, where the TVs are set to generate new frames. It's also called motion smoothing.
How does the little chips in those TVs generate whole new frames in between the frames.
It's crazy that it works at all. It's one of those, and it's been around quite a long time.
And why is it important? Why is it important? Why would they do that?
You know, it tends to look good on displays in an electronics store, I think, whatever's the sort of brightest, flashiest display in a TV. But it ruins movies because movies are meant to be screened at 24 frames per second, and that creates new frames and turns it into 60 frames per second and makes movies look more like a soap opera. And I'm not the only person to complain about this. Tom Cruise very famously made a video about this. You can Google that if you want. Motion smoothing. They have, in recent years, introduced a thing called filmmaker mode on most TVs. And so I would recommend turning that on or just turning the motion smoothing off. But filmmaker mode will often, it'll detect 24 frames per second content and make sure that it shows it at the correct frame rate. So, things have gotten better. And that was partly because of, the lobbying of Tom Cruise. I Googled this problem specifically with hotels. And of course, other people online have had the exact same problem as me. I'm not the only one that's annoyed by this. So the first and easiest tip I sort of found was buy a universal remote control for a television set.
And take it with you?
And take it with you. These have existed for decades, and they're inexpensive. They're about $20, and it'll come with a sheet with 4-digit codes for each TV manufacturer. So the hotel was an LG TV, so you just look up the 4-digit code, you enter the 4-digit code, and then your universal remote will control the hotel TV. And lo and behold, you hit the menu button, and the proper menu comes up, and you can adjust the settings on the TV, and I felt like it was the biggest win of my life.
Now, isn't there a remote in the room already?
Yes, but you press menu on that remote, and it brings up the hotel's menu that tells you about the amenities of the hotel, because that's how they've programmed those to work. But I did that. I had access to all of the, sometimes it's just too bright or too dark, a hotel TV, and they don't even let you adjust that.
Right.
But I turned off the motion smoothing, and it was amazing. So now I have to travel with a universal remote every time I go to a hotel.
The traveling curmudgeon, Brian Stockton, has tips for you to travel. And I'm guessing not one of our listeners is going to take you up on that. Maybe one or two.
Maybe one or two. We'll see.
But yeah, I used to have remote control functions on a phone I had, I don't know which, it was like a Samsung 6 or something.
Oh, interesting.
It had remote control on it, one of my first cell phones. So I would turn the TVs on and off at the McDonald's. I was with my kids at McDonald's once, and I said, why aren't the TVs on? So I turned them on. And then they turned them off.
Yeah.
So I guess they didn't want them on. But I could have done anything I wanted, Brian. I had power.
All right, so on to our first story. This is from Electrek. NIO is a Chinese car company that sells cars mostly in China, but starting to expand. And they went hard into battery swap technology, which is instead of charging your car all the time, your electric car, you drive into one of their battery swap stations, you park the car, you press a button, it does whatever, and in 3 to 5 minutes, it removes the entire gigantic car battery and replaces it with a new fully charged battery.
It's kind of like an oil change facility without people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And a greasy pit.
Yeah.
And then also the cars will park themselves inside. You just pull up outside, you push a button, and it parks you there.
Yeah.
And then it goes and takes out this giant 1,000-pound battery from underneath your car and swaps it with a newly charged one. And sometimes even a bigger battery if you want to go on a trip, like you have that options.
Yeah. And of course, this is a big thing for scooters in Taiwan. We've talked about, it's not automatic, but you can drive an electric scooter in Taiwan and just pop out the battery, stick it in a charging station, pull out a fresh one. This is not universal. These are just specific to NIO cars. And, this has been talked about since the beginning of electric cars, but I'm just surprised how far this has come, because there's no indication of anybody doing anything like this in North America. So this just seems like weird, crazy foreign technology, but it is huge. And they did recently 175,000 battery swaps in a single day. They have these battery swap locations all over China. This was a bit of a surge for Lunar New Year. This is a big sort of holiday period in China.
2 weeks of shutting down the country, kind of.
Yeah, so very busy for travel days, lots of people traveling. And really, in many cases, this is quicker than pumping gas, which is often one of the complaints you'll hear about electric cars.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I don't want to wait 15, 20 minutes to charge
I don't want to
my
wait
car.
to pump gas. I'll just swap my battery. Thank you, petroleum people.
Yeah. So this is quicker than filling up with gas.
There's a few of these in Europe too, by the way. The Neo has a bit of a presence in Europe, and they've got a few battery swap stations. I don't know the numbers, but
yeah.
And there, of course, we talked recently about trucks, like medium and heavy duty trucks are doing this as well in China very quickly, switching to this model.
Yeah, and you can still charge them, but for road trips, this is the solution. And yeah, who knows? Maybe this will continue to expand, even though I was not really expecting it.
Some people, I guess, you lease your battery. Is that right? Do you buy the car, you lease the battery type of thing?
Yeah, it's some kind of situation like that, because obviously you're not keeping whatever battery is in your car if you're swapping it. So something you set up, an agreement you set up when you purchase the car.
Right. Well, I like that. I never used to like it, and now I'm starting to see the appeal of it. We'll see, as batteries become very big and longer range and more energy dense, and maybe some cars won't need it. Not everyone will. Certainly seems to make sense for robo-taxis, don't you think?
Yeah, and it would be better if it was a universal standard like the Gogoro scooters, where everybody sort of took the same battery, and it doesn't seem like we're necessarily going to get to that. But that was certainly something I remember being talked about 10, 12 years ago, that people were trying to invent a universal car battery that could easily be swapped in any kind of car. But, in all of our, like my Apple laptops, there was a while there where with the Apple laptops where you could swap out the batteries yourselves. It was like a compartment on the bottom of the laptop. And they only did that for a couple of years. And for whatever reason, they decided it was more efficient to just have it built in.
I hate that because,
it takes up more space if it has to be a removable battery.
I see. Well, and probably more weight. But still, you got to unscrew the whole thing and pry it apart now if you want to change the battery. Which I haven't done because I usually plug in, but a lot of people will have to change it. My son had to do that. Amazed, he's not as technical as you and I, and he was able to pull it off and get his laptop open and buy. He bought a crappy one on Amazon. It only lasted him a year and a half or something, or a year, it's very disappointing. So now he's in the market I thought he thinks he needs to buy a new laptop. He does not.
Well,
just buy the proper battery.
This is how this works, James. Everyone takes their computers and throws them out every 3 years.
And supposedly, because we talk about batteries all the time, they're improving, the technology is improving, the laptop batteries should be having a longer life cycle. And some of these things that we talk about for batteries that have not 1,000 cycles, but, I've heard 100,000 in a solid state battery. Some of that will come to your electronics, whether you drive electric or not, and will improve your life there. A lot of the improvements for batteries came from portable electronics and made their way to cars, and now it's kind of the other way around because most cells are going into grid storage for the electricity grids around the world to store solar and so forth, and also cars and trucks.
Yeah, and for the Apple products that I've been buying over the years, the batteries have improved and they do last a little bit longer, but I wouldn't say it's a super huge improvement. But they did recently, like now with the Apple phones and the laptops, you can set a maximum charge rate now, which you could never do before. So often with an electric car, you only charge it to 80% because that's better for the battery. So yeah, you can do that now with iPhones and some of the Mac laptops as well. And that should help make them last longer.
All right, let's move back to Mexico. This is a segment I call Why Fossil Fuels Are Bad. Example 300.
Yeah.
I'm using 300 because it's our 300th episode. So this is, there's so many reasons why fossil fuels are bad. And here's another one.
So for the last 10 years, we've seen a steady increase in the price of oil around the world, which is why you have the cartels getting into the oil business, because it's more profitable for them to steal and sell than it is cocaine.
So with the violence in Mexico this past week after the killing of a cartel head and people being stranded there and flights getting canceled, even from around here, people are going and Jan, my partner, had 2 coworkers stranded in Mexico.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a popular thing to go to Mexico. For me, I've always been a bit nervous about it and haven't gone to Mexico, but I was surprised when learning about what was going on there now that the drug cartels actually make as much money stealing oil from pipelines as they do selling cocaine and other drugs in some regions. And they do it daily.
So
Like billions of dollars a year, billions are taken.
I'm imagining they just take a spigot and they just pound it into the pipeline and then
You
turn the
imagined
spigot
wrong,
in.
Mr. Stockton. You imagined
Oh,
wrong.
did I?
They have an expert petroleum guy that they probably got from the refinery, paid off, and threatened his family, and they will come in and it takes 2 hours to drill into that pipe.
Huh.
And I'm assuming sparks might be an issue. I don't know. We'll get to that in a second. But yeah, and then the pipes aren't as buried as deep. Like I've got pipelines behind my house.
Yeah.
And when they dig them up to inspect them, they're way down. Like, I don't know, 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet. I don't know. They're way down.
Yeah.
And these are only a few feet underground, like as little as 4 feet, because they don't have, frost there.
Yeah.
Per se, or not real frost that goes deep. So yeah, that goes on, and they dig them up, and the oil companies come in and turn that off with the Mexican authorities with them. Then they'll do it the next day a few feet over, tap in there, they drill in, they somehow weld on a thing without blowing up, and it doesn't always happen. Sometimes bad things happen. January 18th, 2019, fuel thieves in a field near the small town of, oh God, I can't pronounce that, Talahulapan, drilled into the Texapan-Pauza Rico-Tula pipeline, propelling a jet of fuel into the sky. Sometimes these are gasoline pipelines, so you can put them right into your car, which is weird. Mexico has a big oil industry. They have a pretty significant oil industry, and they're going to start selling oil to Cuba again. Maybe Cuba will be able to put on their generators again. We'll see. Maybe flights can return there, but right now you can't go to Cuba, so maybe you go to Mexico, and maybe you don't go to Mexico. So I don't know where you go.
Yeah.
The thieves fled when this happened, this jet of fuel into the sky. So it left this geyser of fuel just cascading down into a field, and everyone came, all the locals came, because there's a lot of poverty. The locals came and they gathered the gasoline in buckets. They kind of leaned in and tried not to get covered in gasoline.
Yeah.
This is not funny, Brian. Don't smile. It gets worse.
Yeah.
As night fell, local families started to arrive at the pipeline to try and fill small plastic buckets and bottles with a few dollars of free fuel gushing from the earth. But what happened is there was fumes around, and the fumes, because it was a hot day, sort of hovered above the people.
Oh, yeah.
And as the sun went down, the fumes sort of lowered down onto the people, and they became intoxicated. They became completely irrational. Some people were smoking cigarettes while getting gasoline. But what I learned is a lit cigarette isn't hot enough to actually ignite it.
Huh.
Which surprised the hell out of me, because you can't smoke at gas stations, never can.
Yeah.
Not that I've smoked ever. I haven't, but you always see the no smoking at gas stations, and you think, well, if someone smoked here, we'd all die. But it's actually static electricity. So if you bump into somebody trying to get some gasoline in your bucket, you can cause a spark, and that's enough to set it off. It's the static. And that's what my brother-in-law, who worked in the oil industry and as a manager, used to tell me. He always wanted me to ground myself when I went to the gas station, touch the car as I get out. So, okay. I don't think there's many examples of people blowing up from static electricity at a gas station, and I wasn't about to do that. But yeah, the hot fumes were like a cloud of gas overhead, and they came down, intoxicated the people, and the whole thing went up in flames because of a static electricity. And people were like torches running away and, completely lit up. It was a horrible, horrible scene. You can't watch any of these videos without getting warnings of graphic content, and it is graphic.
Yeah, I am not going to attempt to watch any of them.
Well, okay, I don't recommend anyone does, but it's just a terrible, terrible thing. And this is, this doesn't happen with solar panels, Brian. It does not happen with solar panels. That's kind of my point here. Criminal groups have been stealing fuel, which they call hachicol, in Mexico since the 1990s. Early thieves drilled into pipelines and used taps, hoses, and jerry cans to take fuel. And this basic method is still used today, but on a much larger scale. So they have, experts doing this, and you get paid a lot of money or a percentage of the... And then you can go, like undercover journalists go into town, and you can see all these... They might be something our farmer uses for chemicals around here, a big, clear-ish, whitish bin of fluid on the back of the vehicle. They might haul diesel to the farm that way. These were all filled with gasoline right from the pipeline, and they were selling them to people. They sell them cheaper than the gas station rates.
Wow.
And you just fill up, somebody comes by and you fill up, and everyone's doing it. They sold cheap stolen fuel to their communities and acted like Robin Hood figures. And the pipeline tapping, as you might guess, was very dangerous, though. Their stories were sometimes celebrated in songs, which is weird. Some thieves even prayed to El Nino, a folk saint linked to oil theft, for protection. Yes, El Nino Hachikololio, a folk saint linked to oil theft, which for protection. And I guess he doesn't always come through, this oil theft saint. They have a saint for everything. We'll bring that up with the Pope when we get our one-on-one.
Sure.
Around 2007, bigger criminal groups moved in to the fuel theft business, including the cartel that we've been hearing about in the news this week. The Zetas, an armed wing of the Gulf cartel, pushed into the market in Tamaulipas. U.S. intelligence revealed the Zetas were running a large fuel theft smuggling operation in the Burgos Basin. Several factors made fuel theft more attractive to major crime groups because, government crackdown on drug trafficking said, well, hey, this is easier. We'll just steal fuel. We know how to do it, and we can do it. We can coerce people. Mexico also reduced fossil fuel subsidies, causing gas prices to rise, and higher prices meant bigger profits from stolen fuel. And by 2010, both the Gulf Cartel and the Zetas expanded their fuel theft operations. They used the money to fund a violent war after the Zetas split from the Gulf Cartel. And in 2024 alone, the state of Hidalgo recorded 2,450 illegal pipeline taps. That's 1 year, Brian, so multiple per day.
That is crazy amount.
It's an ongoing operation, and they're just skimming off, because the oil industry in Mexico is nationalized, so the government gets their tax money, their revenue from there, and uses it for programs, and then, billions of dollars of this stuff is stolen every year. It's millions and millions of dollars that doesn't go into taxes, though, for programs. And while drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl and methamphetamine, I'm sick this week, meth remains the main revenue stream, illegal fuel that generates billions of dollars annually, with estimates suggesting it has become nearly as profitable in certain areas due to high profit margins and lower risk compared to drug trafficking. So who knew that the drug traffickers were almost equally involved in stealing fossil fuels?
Yeah. So the clean energy equivalent of this would be you run onto a solar farm with your own solar panel and put it over top of the other solar panel to steal the sunshine that's coming down to the ground.
I think that you might charge a battery off that solar, that you would steal the electrons that are generated from that solar panel and drive away with them and sell them to other people.
Yeah.
Less flammable, I might add. So probably safer, because there's been a lot of disasters. There was one where, people were killed. A river of oil flowed down the road and took a left turn here and a right turn there where there was lower, and then ignited, and everyone was killed. And the survivors, they got a settlement from the oil company, and then the cartels come and kidnap that person and say, give me your settlement. So I don't know, like Amelia's friend in Mexico that we had on the show a couple of weeks ago to help me with the pronunciation said that the cartels do a lot of work with the communities. Like they'll be like the fossil fuel interests here. They'll sponsor a park or a sporting event, or like they'll put money back in to win people over, but they also do terrible things to people sometimes. And anyone out there who's buying cocaine, I don't think anyone is, don't do it.
Yeah.
People won't buy blood diamonds, but those same people sometimes buy illicit drugs. Just don't buy illicit drugs, because you don't know how bloody and horrible those things are. So that's just my side message from that. But also the main message, Brian, fossil fuel's bad. We don't need them.
Yeah.
We don't need them. There are alternatives, and there's so many reasons why they're bad.
Fossil fuels bad, reason number 300. All right, we're going to move on to Ethiopia here with a story from Electrek, and we talked about this back when it happened. Ethiopia, to everyone's surprise, banned combustion car sales back in 2024, and they didn't really do it for ecological reasons. They did it for economical reasons, because Ethiopia, not a particularly wealthy country, and these aren't millions of car sales either. These car sales in Ethiopia are more in the thousands rather than the millions. But as a poor country, they were spending massive amounts of money on importing petroleum, $4 billion alone on refined fuel imports, making petroleum one of the country's largest import expenses.
They actually have petroleum in Ethiopia, but they don't refine it there. So they get extorted, they export it.
Right.
And then they get dinged with a really high rate of it coming back. And they used to subsidize it, right? They used to subsidize it by something like 25%. So people were running generators to power their homes because there was another place where the electricity grid wasn't working. And, of course, the solar panel will cover that nicely.
Yeah, so they're working on reducing this $4 billion that they have to spend importing fuel. So they banned the sale of new combustion cars. They have also prioritized the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, called GERD, and the Koisha hydropower project. And these are huge hydropower projects, 6 gigawatts and 2 gigawatts respectively. The GERD is expected to double Ethiopia's hydropower-based electricity once it becomes fully online. It's partially operational now.
I should point out that I have GERD and I take a pill for it. It completely clears it up.
Yeah. So this started producing power, this big one, in September 2025, and it will eventually provide emissions-free power to nearly 45% of Ethiopia's population that currently doesn't even have electricity in their homes. And this is a positive revenue stream for the country. And its neighbors, it'll sell some of this power to the neighbors, and they're only getting 1 cent per kilowatt hour. But they're still, for a poor country like Ethiopia, this is a massive kind of revenue stream for them. They are selling the excess to Kenya, Tanzania, and Djibouti. I like talking about Djibouti just because it's fun to say.
Djibouti.
Yeah. So by late 2025, about 115,000 EVs are on the roads in Ethiopia. So they're up to 8.3% of the total fleet. So, they have a ways to go, but, every year now that $4 billion that they spend on importing gasoline is going to take a little bit of a hit on the way down. And it's costing about $4 a month to charge an EV in Ethiopia compared to about $27 a month if you're filling it up with gasoline. And in a poor country like that, the medium income is about $50 a month.
So you got 23 extra bucks from renewables. Come on.
Massive.
That is massive.
Massive savings. And so I just expect it to get better from here. 8.3% of the fleet. That's nothing to sneeze at. And just will get bigger every year.
Yeah, I bet next year it's well into the double digits because China is selling them cheaper EVs and also electrified 2- and 3-wheel transportation, not one wheel. I was about to say one wheel.
That does exist.
They have those, but they're not that popular.
Yeah.
Unicycles. That's incredible. That is so significant to think that half of your monthly income is suddenly freed up. Yeah. Like, this is how renewables change lives. And it happens in places like this where there's low income, and it's going to make a big difference for that country and others as well.
Yeah. And the benefit will be cleaner air, but that's not why they're doing it. This is economical. It is cheaper to do, and it makes them more independent, not having to rely on other people to get their fuel.
Wow. Okay, Brian, last week I sat down with a friend of ours, Dean Evans, from the beautiful province of Alberta, Canada.
Yeah.
Formerly of our province. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because he had so much feedback on the podcast. It's kind of hard to get feedback on the podcast because people are tight-lipped about it. They don't want to be rude. They don't want to put themselves out there, maybe.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily engage online that much.
Don't have
we
time.
Sort of complained that we didn't get a lot of views on our YouTube channel, but YouTube is supposed to be kind of an interactive platform. I don't really think of it that way, but It is kind of a social media platform. And really, you and I should be hanging out in the comments and, chatting with people. But, I'm not going to do that.
Well, TikTok, too. The more people get into arguments on our TikTok channel, the more viral our videos go.
Yeah.
That's what they want. They want engagement. They want people arguing. They want people, anti-renewable people arguing with renewable people. back and forth for days.
But when it goes viral like that, there's no need for us to step in because, there's a million people that can just argue with each other. They don't have to argue with us.
That's why I always encourage people, feel free to argue on our various media channels to any extent you want. But Dean had so much to say. He talked about Patreon. He's now a Patreon paying member. And he showed me that process. He said that he wanted to go via his Apple podcast app, but it was $10. I think I raised it to $10 because no one bit on the Apple site. And I was going to have to do a whole bunch of tax papers. So I raised it to 10 so that no one would come necessarily. Or if they did, it would be worth my while type of thing. So then I removed that. You can't no longer subscribe on our Apple app, but you have to go to Patreon to do it, or even use PayPal like some people do. And he just had so many glowing things to say about our podcast and just, he looks forward to it every week. And Dean is not your typical guy that you would necessarily expect to be a listener of ours. Yeah. He's an editor in the film business. He's not a technical person necessarily. We have a lot of engineers listening, a lot of smart people who are into tech. Dean's into tech, but not into this type of tech necessarily. And just had a lot of things to feed back, which was nice to hear and very helpful. So thank you, and a shout out to you, Dean. Thanks for listening. Yeah,
I think sometimes when we get new listeners like that, maybe they're friends of ours, people have no idea what's going on in this space. People have no idea that 8% of the cars in Ethiopia are now electric.
Nope, they do now, though.
And so I think when
Dean knows, he's going to be the smartest guy in any room he's in now.
So when people do check us out like that, I think that, maybe they'll get interested in clean energy.
So contact us if you like about anything, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from our listeners. Sometimes you have gripes and sometimes you have corrections and little things like that, and things you want us to cover. We always read your emails, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And of course, that voicemail is speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
All right, we have another story here from Electrek about South Dakota. And we love talking about South Dakota because it's one of those clean energy states that you wouldn't expect necessarily to be a clean energy state. And
no, I mean, the governor shoots her dogs, for God's sake. What do you expect?
But I drove through there a couple of years ago and just witnessed turbine after turbine after turbine. It was quite lovely. Now, there were also, oil fields as well. But South Dakota, it is huge for wind power, and they've just announced their largest wind farm yet. This is 333.
They're still adding wind? I mean, didn't they get to like 100% at one point? Like 1 month or something, they were selling 110% was wind because they sold it to other places? Or maybe that was North Dakota.
They can certainly get up to 100% of clean power. In 2024 as a whole, it says wind power was 59% of South Dakota. And the only other state that's in a similar position is Iowa. So Iowa and South Dakota, huge for wind. And of course, they do have solar and other things as well. But this is a $750 million installation. This is 87 wind turbines. There's a new transmission line that's 5.5 miles. It's a 230 kilovolt transition line. So this is going to be spread across 68,000 acres in Hacken County near Rapid City. And
so this transmission line will take the power from the wind farms out in the area, these big pylons, they call them, these big towers of holding wires, and then they transmit this high voltage stuff back to where people need it in the cities and so forth, and even other states, I imagine.
Yeah, and if there isn't that infrastructure in place, well, sometimes you have to build it, and that's what they're doing in this case, 5.5 miles of this high voltage stuff. And as we seem to talk about every week, massive power demand on the horizon because of data centers, because of switching to electric cars, because of switching to heat pumps. So I think anytime for the foreseeable future, if you build power, people will buy it. There is no danger anytime soon of anybody building too much power. This is the time to build, and South Dakota going huge into this.
There's even talk about a couple of data centers coming to where we are and using our dirty electricity here from coal. Because there's just such a data center frenzy, I guess.
Yeah.
These data centers are all just the computers, which use a lot of electricity, a lot of cooling, water for cooling, and they power your Amazon purchases, or dare I say, maybe even serve you a podcast from time to time.
Yeah, and hopefully they're going to put solar panels at least on the roofs of these data centers? And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
They don't. They're right there. It's a roof. It's like a Walmart. Stick some panels up there, buddy. Come on.
Yeah.
If electricity is your biggest thing, why aren't you at least putting some of it back in with renewables, for gosh sakes?
These are typically very large, 1 or 2 story buildings with a gigantic flat roof. So yes, for God's sakes, please at least put solar panels on the roof.
Well, the Clean Energy Show is an independent podcast now with 300 episodes, and it's made possible by you guys, our listeners, who support us on Patreon and sometimes PayPal. The links are there in your show notes. Support us if you can. Patreon.com/cleanenergypod. And it's as little as $1 a month, and you get perks, including ad-free episodes, Discord access, discounts at a merch store, which are coming up next month, in March, and early access to episodes before the public, behind-the-scenes material and private updates, and thank you credits, verbal shout-outs on our podcasts of certain levels of support. So please, if you can, support us. Coming up next is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation. U.S.
autonomous robotaxi company Waymo reportedly have driven 200 million miles, or 320 million kilometers autonomously. And not that many people have died, I don't think, yet.
Yes.
So far, so good. They're expanding to more cities now. France sets a new work record in fusion running time. The amount of time that these fusion reactors, not fission, but fusion, which some people think is the energy of the future. 22 minutes is the new record, Brian. 22 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's an improvement. And we talk about fusion every once in a while. And so over this 6-year period, I don't remember what it was 6 years ago, but probably it could run for a few seconds.
Yeah.
6 years ago?
Yeah, something like that. But correct us, right us if we're wrong, but I think it was something like that. And maybe it wasn't even 6 years ago at all. Maybe they didn't have any time 6 years ago. I don't know. I can't remember, but it started with seconds. And then now it's 22 minutes. So that's an improvement. And it's time for a CES Fast Fact. As much as almond milk production uses a heck of a lot of water, it's not nearly as much water as dairy milk takes. So dairy milk land use is way over almond milk. It's like 18 times what almond milk is. Greenhouse gas emissions, way higher than any other kind of plant-based milk, dairy milk. Freshwater use is actually 628.2 liters per unit of milk, and almond milk is 371, not quite half, a little more than half. And soy milk is the lowest, by the way. If you're interested, oat milk is pretty low, too. Yes, this isn't precision fermentation, the sort of, brewery method of making milk by using yeast and fermentation methods of duplicating dairy milk but that's on its way, too. We shall have some updates in future shows. Tesla has been known to score badly in reliability studies in the U.S. and Germany, but it is getting better over the years, Brian. Now, a new auto reliability study in France actually finds that Tesla is topping the charts in reliability, even passing up Toyota, who I think might quietly be getting worse as they jack up the price of their cars by huge amounts. I don't know if the reliability is holding strong on Toyota. So yeah, Tesla was identified as having the least early problems of all the automakers examined in 2025. The analysis concerned cars registered since January 1, 2018. So fairly new cars, but not new.
And I know we talked about this a few years ago because Consumer Reports in the U.S. also puts out reliability figures for cars. And it always seemed like part of the problem was that these statistics were set up for gasoline cars, and electric cars are just different. So it is sometimes an, apples to oranges comparison. So it's sort of hard to find out necessarily which is the right criteria to use. But, we know that electric cars generally are less complicated and typically, fewer things can go wrong.
Yeah, a lot of these things are like complaints from owners, especially with new cars. Like, does it rattle? Is there a rattle that annoys me?
Is there a squeaky door?
Is there a squeaky door? Does my hatch button stop working on my Chevy Bolt? And by the way, saw Chevy Bolt ads now are playing in Canada.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there was that many ads for the first Bolt, but the new 2027 Bolt, which is a limited edition apparently because they're not going to keep making it, charges at 150 kilowatts, is maybe a tinch bigger than the old Bolt. Very interesting, but my partner doesn't want to go back to Chevy. Doesn't like the way they do things. So
Yeah.
I don't know where that leaves us, but I got to get out of Chevy somehow.
Yeah, car dealerships are never fun, and I don't think they've really improved.
Well, it's time for another CAS Fast Fact. 115,000 people left poverty every day for the last 35 years, Brian. 115,000.
Yeah.
And we talked about, Ethiopia. This is what we talked about on the show is becoming more and more part of that process of leaving poverty for some people in some parts of the world. It's one of the happiest things we can possibly talk about on this show. It's a great thing when people's lives improve because of a technology. A study by Fraunhofer ISI finds many German-built PHEV models use far more gasoline than their manufacturers claim. These are hybrids that are plug-in. So you plug them in, they have a gas engine, but you can plug them in and supposedly use them as an EV for, 25 kilometers up to 100 kilometers, depending on the car. Until now, it has been claimed by manufacturers that the vehicles used only a little or almost no fuel when in electric mode. The study showed that this was not, in fact, the case, The Guardian says. This is a problem I had when I test drove one.
Yeah, and of course, people can use them only on electric if you plug it in all the time. But we've heard this before, that a lot of times people just don't bother to plug them in, or they don't have a parking spot where they can plug them in, and it ends up just being kind of like a regular hybrid.
So here's another thing that I found, and I don't know if this is true with all plug-in hybrids, but when I tested one a few years ago, the motor came on, the gas engine came on because it wanted to be ready to come on when needed. So it had to warm itself up. So,
Right.
You can't just go in electric mode. And also, if the temperature drops below room temperature, sometimes they come on to help heat the cabin. So you really are driving around a gas engine, which is just wasting fuel to either get ready to be used at a moment's notice when the battery runs out, or to heat the cabin with waste heat. So
Yeah, and the issue here is not that, maybe this is how they work. Sure, that's fine. That's how they work. But it can sometimes be misleading in terms of the advertising and the way these are promoted.
scientists in Hungary found that ground-mounted solar panels at an intermediate elevation of 1.1 meters achieve the highest efficiency. So 1.1 meters off the ground is the most efficiency you can get in Hungary. And the most power output due to improved airflow and reduced cell temperature. This is the thing a lot of people don't realize. We've said it many times in the show. Solar panels lose their efficiency after 25 degrees Celsius. It doesn't have to be 25 degrees Celsius temperature. With the sun shining on that, it could be, a lot colder than that, and the panels get to 25 and they start to lose a little bit of efficiency. They don't make as much electricity.
Makes sense if they're a little further off the ground, that they're just going to get better ventilation and stay a little bit cooler. So that's great to know.
So when my neighbors ask me if my solar panels work in minus 40, I tell them they're not thermal. They work a different process. They turn photons into electrons, and it's a whole process, and they work better at minus 40 than plus 40. Way better at minus 40 than plus 40. So, yeah. And this was only for solar panels mounted on concrete surfaces. That's all they studied right now. Solar levelized cost of electricity to fall 30% by 2035, says Bloomberg NEF, New Energy Finance. So that's the cost of a unit of electricity from solar, no matter how big your farm is, should be 30% lower by 2035. And of course, they're always wrong, Brian. They always underestimate. But I'm going to throw it out there anyway.
Yeah.
This is from Politico. Trump pressed oil executives to give $1 billion for his campaign. Remember that? He's talked to oil executives and said, give me $1 billion and we'll see what I could do for you. This is the new way the world works. I know we're not supposed to mention his name on the show. You get uncomfortable. But here we are. People in the industry say, what have they gotten in return? Well, they got $14 billion in tax credits that subsidize fossil fuel extraction, $11.4 billion of discount for pumping oil from public lands, $7.2 billion fees saved for polluting the air from methane getting delayed, $4.2 billion of discount for pumping oil from U.S. oceans, and a $427 million tax handout for developing oil and gas wells. So that's it's about $37 billion in Trump welfare to big oil. And reason number 301 why fossil fuels suck. Elizabeth Warren, the U.S. politician, had that graphic up on our feed. A Waymo agent. This is the Waymo, the robotaxi company, United States-based. An agent. So they have agents. They have human beings that monitor all these autonomous driving vehicles, right? Well, one of these agents for Waymo can monitor for more than 40 taxis at a time because of the way their system is set up. Now, this is more than Chinese robotaxi rivals are currently doing, because right now, those are the biggest people doing this in the world. Pony AI has about 20 people, and they're aiming to get to 30 vehicles per person per agent. And WeRide is only 3 currently, and they're aiming to get to 10 vehicles per agent. So Waymo, 1 agent, a lot of vehicles. That's an important process for this.
Yeah, so the better this self-driving technology gets, the fewer humans you're going to need to kind of sort of back up, supervise, and manage. And that's just going to improve over time for sure.
Now, I personally fully expect China to overcome this gap and become superior at some point and cheaper at some point than North American car companies. We'll see what happens. But the trends are, that's what happens usually. This is a local story, Brian, for your chuckles.
Yeah.
A RCMP, the National Police Force, and sometimes Rural Police Force here in Canada, are investigating after a Sask Power, that's our local utility, after one of their poles was stolen from a rural farm property on January 27th. Police say the theft occurred around 9:30 a.m. in broad daylight when unknown individuals cut down a live power pole connected to a transformer because they really wanted a pole.
Yeah.
The outage disrupted electricity in the area for about 2 hours while the utility worked to restore service. Investigators believe the pole was dragged through the farmyard into a nearby field and may have been loaded onto a vehicle. Now, I think somebody wants to put up a power pole on their property, and power poles, I'm guessing, might cost a few bucks.
Yeah, so you just cut one down, and then you get a free power pole.
Yeah, even though it's live. This isn't Mexico. This is like stealing Mexican oil from a live, pipeline. It's really, yeah, and it was a local story. It wasn't a Florida story. This did not happen in Florida.
Maybe they wanted to do a caber toss, it's that thing where they throw the big...
Yeah. I don't, that's a big caber. I don't think you could carry a pole. Anyway, congratulations, people, for stealing a live power pole and causing a blackout. Researcher Tor Instoy, I take it that's Sweden or somewhere in the Nordic region, found a new Chinese-made Neo, which we talked about earlier, EV. These are in Europe. They sent 90% of their data to servers in China. So these cars, lots of cameras on them, lots of GPS and things. And this is a concern that some people have about Chinese cars coming to North America or Europe, is that these, data go back to China, and the Chinese government can, I believe, have use of that data. It's the way the system and rules work if they want to. So they're probably not going to, monitor your and my movements. You never know. I think the Pope does. I think the Pope's closely monitoring us. But, some diplomat or some person, they could get information if they needed it, I think.
Yeah.
Portugal just hit 80.7% renewable electricity for the entire month of January. Brian, the middle of winter, Portugal.
Amazing.
80.7% renewables. All electricity is coming from renewables practically in January. Ukraine turned on Slovakia and Hungary. You know why? Because Ukrainian operatives blew up the main node of the Druzhba oil pipeline that supplies 100% of Slovakia's oil and 86% of Hungary's oil. And those two countries want their Russian oil. And Ukraine doesn't want their war machine powered by the oil that they sell to those countries, so they blew it up. Reason number 302, why fossil fuels suck. And finally this week, solar power is used to charge an EV in the subarctic. A pilot project conducted by EZ and Subaru just demonstrated it is possible to use a portable solar panel concoction and a portable EV charger to charge an electric Subaru in the subarctic, a place where typically many people may not believe solar power would work, says Clean Technica. The capacity of the solar panels is about 450 watts each times 4, and they were temporarily installed to demonstrate the principle, and they spat out about 2.9 kilowatts of charging, which is a low-end level 2 charging that you might have at home if you don't have a lot of power on your panel. Mine used to be 3 kilowatts, and it would charge Well, 25 kilometers an hour.
No, 2.9 kilowatts. That's decent. You wouldn't need to be stuck for too many days to get your car up to a full charge.
See, I know that solar works in the Arctic, but this time of year, maybe not so much because there's not a lot of light.
Short days, and you'd have to angle the panels almost upright to get the most sun. So yeah, the short days and, occasional cloud cover would probably be your biggest issues.
So they're saying that the local indigenous people have a preference for clean, renewable electricity and sustainable transportation because of their environmental ethic. And they simply want technology also that does the job. They are a semi-nomadic people, so moving without fossil fuel challenges would be ideal. And they are also environmentally very astute, so clean off-grid energy production and charging suits them very well, and I hope that their lives improve with renewable energy too.
Absolutely. All right, that's the show for this week. You can find us on social media at Clean Energy Pod. That Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com is the email, and remember to hit that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app.
And remember, our Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. Thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard, Brett Routley, and Tiernan. And we'll talk to you next week. Thank you all for supporting our podcast.
See you next week.